Every brush of her hand felt forbidden, and I couldn't look away. The first time I noticed her, it was an ordinary afternoon at my friend's house, but nothing about that day would feel ordinary again. I had come over to hang out, expecting the usual lazy hours of video games and bad jokes, yet the moment I walked through the door, something shifted. She was there, my friend's stepmom, standing in the kitchen with that calm, effortless grace that seemed to fill the room without demanding it. She was in her early 40s, yet she moved with the kind of quiet confidence that only life experience can teach. Her hair fell softly over her shoulders, catching the light just enough to give her an almost ethereal glow, and I found myself suddenly aware of every detail: the subtle curve of her smile, the way she tilted her head when she concentrated on something. I tried to act normal, but the first brush of contact was inevitable. As she reached past me to grab a bowl from the counter, our arms brushed ever so lightly. The touch was fleeting, almost accidental, yet electric in a way I hadn't expected. My skin tingled where her warmth had met mine, a subtle reminder that some connections are instantaneous, even when unspoken. She looked over her shoulder at me, her eyes holding a faint spark of amusement, and in that moment, I felt an odd combination of guilt and curiosity. Was it inappropriate to notice this? Could it be that she sensed it too? Her voice broke through my thoughts, soft but carrying a teasing edge. "Careful, don't brush against me like that, or I'll think you want to." She smiled, but there was a weight behind the words, a playful warning that somehow made my heart skip a beat. I stumbled over a response, muttering something inane, but the moment lingered longer than it should have. Her presence was magnetic, not in an overt way, but in the subtle pull of familiarity mixed with restraint. I was drawn to her, yet acutely aware of the boundaries I shouldn't cross. As the afternoon continued, she moved through the house with an easy rhythm, occasionally passing close enough for another accidental brush, a shoulder here, a hand near mine there. Each touch, each glance, carried a quiet tension that built slowly but unmistakably. I caught myself watching her, noticing the gentle sway of her movements, the way her laugh softened her otherwise commanding presence. She seemed both confident and quietly vulnerable, like a woman who had mastered the art of composure while still harboring moments of unspoken longing. Even though it was the first day I'd truly paid attention, I felt a strange comfort in the tension. It wasn't dangerous, it wasn't reckless, it was simply alive. Something about her presence made the mundane feel charged, made my own emotions sharper, my awareness of space and proximity more acute. By the time I left that afternoon, my mind replayed every brush of contact, every fleeting glance, every unspoken word. And I knew, somehow, that this wasn't just a casual encounter. It was the start of something that neither of us fully understood yet, but that would quietly, inexorably grow. After that first charged afternoon, I found myself acutely aware of her presence every time I visited. She moved through the house with that same effortless elegance, yet now, every gesture, every step, seemed to carry an unspoken awareness of me. I noticed it first when she handed me a plate of cookies she had just baked. Our fingers brushed as she passed it over, and I felt a jolt of warmth, a flash of awareness that made my chest tighten. It wasn't an overtly intimate gesture, but the weight of proximity, the electricity in the smallest contact, lingered far longer than it should have. She caught my fleeting glance, her eyes sparkling with a teasing light. "Careful," she said, letting a slow smile curl at the corner of her lips. "If you keep brushing against me like that, I might start thinking you enjoy it." The words weren't heavy, but they carried a subtle charge, a mixture of playfulness and something more, something I couldn't quite define. I laughed nervously, trying to act casual, but my mind was already replaying the contact, the warmth of her hand, the softness of her skin against mine. Over the next few days, she seemed to intentionally place herself close to me in ways that could be dismissed as coincidence. I helped her carry a stack of books from one room to another, and when our hands met on the top book, the brief pressure was enough to make me notice the faint tremor of her grip. My heart raced, yet I reminded myself that nothing inappropriate had happened, just two people passing objects in a shared space. But the tension between us had shifted. It was no longer accidental, and I found myself constantly reading her small movements for signs, any hint of her thoughts. What fascinated me most was her duality. Outwardly, she remained poised and confident, exuding the calm control of someone who had seen enough of the world to know herself. Yet in these small, fleeting moments, I glimpsed vulnerability, a pause in her speech, a softened gaze, a slight hesitation in her smile. It was a quiet invitation to notice her, to engage, and I felt both guilty and exhilarated to be the one paying attention. Each touch, no matter how accidental, carried a weight I hadn't expected, an intimate dialogue without words. She never crossed boundaries, and neither did I, but the playful tension thrived in its restraint. A hand lightly resting on the counter near mine, a shoulder brushing past me as we reached for the same object, or the simple act of standing close in a narrow hallway. All of these small moments were charged with unspoken questions and restrained desire. Every time she teased me about it, her voice soft but deliberate, I felt that mix of excitement and hesitation, knowing that whatever this was, it was delicate and fragile. By the end of that week, I realized I was no longer simply a visitor in her home. I was someone caught in the orbit of a presence I couldn't ignore. The more we interacted, the more I became aware of the rhythm of her gestures, the warmth of her proximity, and the subtle ways she tested boundaries without ever breaking them. She was teaching me patience, awareness, and the intoxicating power of restraint. And in that playful dance of closeness and hesitation, I began to understand the magnetic pull she held over me, a pull I couldn't, and didn't want to, resist. It was a quiet evening when I found myself alone in the living room with her. My friend had stepped out to run an errand, leaving us in that rare, accidental privacy. The house felt warmer somehow, the fading sunlight spilling across the floor in golden strips, illuminating the soft edges of her face and the calm strength in her posture. She had been tidying up, and as I helped carry a stack of dishes to the kitchen, our hands brushed again, lightly, almost timidly, and this time, I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Her reaction was subtle, but it was there, a slight pause, a flicker of warmth in her eyes, and a quiet intake of breath that made the room feel smaller, more intimate. There was a rhythm to our movements, a dance of accidental touches and shared glances. She placed a hand briefly on my forearm to guide me around the narrow kitchen counter, and I felt the soft pressure of her fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. It was neither overwhelming nor inappropriate, but it resonated with something deep inside me, an unspoken acknowledgement of connection. As we settled back on the couch afterward, the conversation drifted from casual topics to something more personal. She spoke softly about her life before meeting my friend's father, the challenges she had faced, and the quiet disappointments that no one outside her close circle had ever known. Her voice was calm but tinged with a vulnerability I hadn't expected, a side of her that the confident, poised exterior usually kept hidden. I listened, captivated, realizing that each word, each subtle tremor in her tone, carried a trust she had extended to me. I wanted to say something reassuring, to show her that I noticed, that I understood. And so I reached out, letting my hand brush against hers, not forcefully, just lightly, in a gesture meant to convey support. Her fingers lingered against mine, the warmth of her skin soft and grounding. She glanced at me, eyes searching mine for a moment, and in that instant, I felt the unspoken bond forming between us, a delicate mix of trust, care, and restrained desire. It wasn't about romance yet, not openly, but it was about closeness, about recognition of each other's presence in a world that rarely paused for quiet attention. The evening passed with small gestures that carried weight, a hand resting briefly on the back of mine as she laughed at a story, a slight tilt of her head as she looked at me, a lingering smile when our eyes met across the room. Every detail was amplified by the silence around us, the stillness that made even a casual touch feel monumental. In that quiet, I understood something essential. Connection wasn't always about words or bold declarations. Sometimes it was about noticing the subtle warmth of proximity, the gentle brush of a hand, the soft cadence of someone opening up their heart, even just a little. By the time my friend returned, the room had returned to normal in appearance, but everything had shifted for me. That evening had planted the seed of understanding, the awareness that there was more beneath her composed exterior than anyone else might see. And in that awareness, I felt the first real stirrings of something profound, not just attraction, but a desire to be present, to notice, and to be trusted in return. Over the next few days, the quiet intimacy we had shared began to carry over into every interaction, subtle but undeniable. Every glance, every incidental touch, seemed charged with a tension neither of us dared to name aloud. I noticed it first during an ordinary chore, helping her carry laundry from the bedroom to the dryer. Our arms brushed repeatedly as we shifted baskets, and each time, a spark seemed to pass between us, small but persistent, like electricity dancing just under the skin. I became acutely aware of her presence, of the warmth radiating from her, and of the gentle way she moved around me. She seemed to notice it too. Her smiles lingered slightly longer than necessary. Her eyes occasionally caught mine and held them just a moment more than politeness required. When she leaned over to fold a towel, her hair brushed my arm, and for an instant, I felt the faint pressure of her warmth seeping through the thin fabric of my sleeve. My heartbeat quickened, though I tried to focus on the task at hand, telling myself that this was innocent, that it was merely proximity, but my body disagreed with reason. Later, we found ourselves sitting side by side on the couch, ostensibly watching a movie, though either of us paid much attention to the screen. The space between us felt charged. Our legs nearly touched. Her hand rested lightly near mine on the armrest, and I caught the soft tremor as she adjusted it. She glanced at me, lips slightly parted, eyes questioning, almost teasing. The tension was unspoken but unmistakable, a silent conversation in the language of glances, pauses, and fleeting touches. I noticed the subtleties more than ever, the way her shoulders softened when she laughed, the slight tilt of her head when she listened, the gentle way she rested a hand on the couch cushions near me. Every small movement, every careful gesture, seemed designed to test boundaries without ever crossing them. I was both drawn and cautious, aware of the fragile line we were tiptoeing along, captivated by her presence yet determined to respect it. That evening, as she stood in the doorway talking to me about something trivial, her hand brushed against mine once more. She looked at me, half smile teasing, half serious, and said quietly, "You're very aware today, aren't you?" My throat tightened, and I struggled for a casual response. Her words carried a weight beyond their surface meaning, an acknowledgement of the tension simmering between us. For the first time, I felt that our connection was mutual, that she too sensed the slow pull, the silent desire simmering beneath the surface. Even in those quiet, everyday moments, the attraction was undeniable, yet restrained, like a flame flickering behind a glass. It was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. Each brush of skin, each lingering glance, was a reminder that what we shared was more than casual, more than simple familiarity. And though nothing overt had happened, both of us were increasingly aware of the unspoken longing that hovered in the spaces between words and touches, waiting patiently for the right moment to fully reveal itself. It was one of those quiet evenings that seemed ordinary on the surface, but beneath it, every moment carried weight. The house was mostly silent, the kind of silence that made every small sound, the clinking of a glass, the soft shuffle of feet on the hardwood, feel amplified. My friend had gone out for errands, leaving me alone with her again. She was in the kitchen, organizing ingredients for dinner, and I found myself hovering nearby, unsure whether my presence was welcome or merely tolerated. As I reached for a bowl to help her, our hands met briefly. The touch was light, almost fleeting, but this time neither of us withdrew. There was a quiet acknowledgement in the contact, a shared understanding that the small spark between us was no longer accidental. I felt the warmth of her fingers linger against mine, and for a moment, the mundane act of passing a bowl felt charged, intimate. We started talking about something casual at first, but slowly, the conversation drifted to more personal territory. She spoke softly about her day, revealing a vulnerability she rarely showed to anyone else. There was a gentle sadness in her voice when she mentioned moments of loneliness, of the quiet weight of responsibilities, of the little disappointments that often went unnoticed. I listened closely, feeling a protective instinct stir within me, not because I needed to fix anything, but because I wanted her to feel seen, truly seen, in a way that went beyond surface conversation. Without thinking, I reached out again, brushing my hand along hers, letting it rest for a heartbeat. She didn't pull away. Instead, she looked at me with a softness that was almost shocking in its honesty. Her eyes seemed to search mine, and for the first time, I felt as though she might understand exactly how I felt, a mix of admiration, curiosity, and a quiet desire to be near her. There were no words yet, no outright declarations, but the unspoken message was clear. Then, in a moment of rare openness, she smiled and admitted something almost in passing. "I've always appreciated how attentive you are. Not many people notice the little things." Her tone wasn't flirtatious exactly. It was warm, sincere, and surprisingly intimate. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. I wanted to tell her that I noticed her too, that I noticed every subtle gesture, every laugh, every soft glance, but the words felt too heavy for the moment. Instead, I let a small smile respond, letting my eyes convey what my voice could not. As the evening continued, the atmosphere between us shifted. There were more lingering touches, fingertips brushing over a shared surface, a hand resting momentarily near mine on the counter, and a growing sense of trust. We were learning each other's rhythms, discovering the comfort of closeness without needing to define it yet. Every small gesture, every quiet glance, became a confession in itself, a silent acknowledgement of mutual attraction, tempered by respect, patience, and understanding. By the time dinner was ready, the tension had softened into a warm intimacy. The attraction was still there, undeniable, but it was now grounded in genuine connection and emotional honesty. I realized that this slow, careful unfolding, the accidental brushes, the shared smiles, the unspoken understanding, was building something deeper than mere desire. It was the foundation of trust, of mutual recognition, and of a bond that neither of us needed to rush. The days that followed carried a rhythm of their own, a slow cadence of moments that felt ordinary to anyone watching, but extraordinary to those involved. We moved through the house together, sharing chores, conversation, and occasional laughter, each interaction layering the tension that had been building since that first accidental touch. It wasn't just the physical closeness anymore. It was the quiet emotional bond that was forming, subtle and profound. One evening, she invited me to sit with her in the living room while she sipped tea and read a book. I hesitated at first, unsure whether I should intrude on her solitude, but the warmth of her smile invited me in. We sat side by side on the couch, close enough for our shoulders to brush occasionally, but far enough apart to respect the unspoken boundaries. Yet each accidental touch seemed amplified in the stillness, the soft graze of her sleeve against mine, the faint warmth of her arm just near mine, the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. We didn't need to speak much. Words had become secondary to the subtle communication between us. The lingering glance when she laughed, the way she shifted slightly toward me when she wanted my attention, the soft brush of her hand against mine as she reached for her cup. I noticed every detail, the warmth of her skin, the softness of her hair when it fell across her shoulder, the way her eyes sparkled when she was fully present in the moment. Every small gesture became a language of its own, a dialogue of trust and curiosity. At one point, she rested her hand lightly near mine on the armrest, and I felt a surge of awareness that made my chest tighten. I wanted to close the gap, to hold her hand, but restraint felt necessary, not from fear, but from respect. Still, the simple proximity, the ability to share the space quietly, was enough to communicate what words could not. We were acknowledging each other's presence, noticing each other, and discovering the comfort of being near someone who understood, who mattered, without rushing toward anything more overt. She spoke softly about her day, her words flowing easily as if confiding in a close friend, and I realized how rare these moments of vulnerability must be for her. The fact that she shared them with me, in a setting so ordinary yet intimate, felt monumental. I responded with small touches of empathy, a nod, a quiet smile, letting her know she was seen and heard. Each connection, no matter how subtle, deepened the trust between us. By the end of that evening, the tension that had always lingered between us had shifted into something warmer, a gentle intimacy that didn't need declarations or dramatic gestures. The brushes of skin, the lingering looks, the shared silences were all threads weaving together a tapestry of mutual understanding. For the first time, I realized that what had begun as accidental sparks had become a quiet, abiding closeness, an emotional intimacy that was every bit as compelling as the unspoken desire. In that shared space, I felt an unexpected peace. There was no rush, no expectation, only the knowledge that we were building something slowly, carefully, and meaningfully. And in that careful unfolding, I understood the beauty of restraint, the way patience and awareness could transform simple moments into the most profound connections. The culmination of our slow, quiet journey arrived one evening that seemed ordinary at first, but was charged with all the small moments we had shared over the past weeks. My friend was out again, leaving us alone in the familiar comfort of the house. The air carried a calm warmth, mingled with the soft glow of lamps and the fading traces of sunset through the windows. It was one of those rare moments where time seemed to slow, giving space for reflection, presence, and subtle understanding. She was standing by the window, gazing at the evening sky. I approached quietly, not wanting to startle her, and noticed the way the light kissed the contours of her face. Our eyes met, and for a long second, it felt like all the small, lingering touches, glances, and shared silences had led to this single moment of acknowledgement. Her gaze was soft, yet steady, carrying the warmth, understanding, and restrained desire that had defined our interactions from the very beginning. As I drew closer, our shoulders brushed lightly, and I felt that familiar warmth, a gentle reminder of the connection we had cultivated so carefully. She looked at me and, with a quiet smile, said something simple but loaded with meaning. "I've enjoyed having you here, more than I expected." There was no teasing edge, no playful warning this time, just honesty, calm and gentle, resonating in the small space between us. My chest tightened as I realized how much we had come to mean to each other without ever crossing boundaries, without ever needing to rush. We shared a slow, quiet conversation, punctuated by gentle touches, the brush of a hand as she passed me a cup of tea, the soft leaning of her shoulder against mine as we laughed at a shared memory. Each gesture, though small, carried the weight of everything we had experienced: curiosity, admiration, playful tension, and the delicate, growing affection that had been nurtured over time. There was no need for dramatic declarations. The closeness, the awareness, and the shared warmth said more than words ever could. When the evening drew to a close, I prepared to leave. She walked me to the door, and for a moment, we simply stood there, close enough to feel the other's presence fully. She rested her hand lightly on my arm, and I felt the subtle pressure, the quiet steadiness of her touch, like a promise rather than a demand. Our eyes met, and without a word, the understanding passed between us. What we had shared was real, meaningful, and entirely ours. Before I stepped out, she gave me a gentle smile and a soft, lingering hug. Her cheek brushed against my shoulder, and I felt the warmth of her body and the steady heartbeat beneath her, a quiet reassurance that everything we had built, every glance, every touch, every silent moment, had brought us here. As I walked away, The memory of that contact stayed with me, a gentle reminder of trust, patience, and the deep connection that had grown slowly, carefully, and beautifully. In that quiet evening, everything was resolved, not through grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but through subtle acknowledgement, emotional honesty, and tender, respectful intimacy. The story had reached its natural conclusion, leaving both of us aware of the bond we shared, confident in its depth, and open to whatever the future might hold, all while honoring the delicate, slow-burning romance that had carried us here.